Hello, and welcome to the Wanderings Podcast, a photographer's exploration of art, science, and world culture. I am your host, Pedro Bonatto, a fine art and advertising photographer based in Toronto, Canada. In this show, I talk to artists, designers, scientists, filmmakers, authors, entrepreneurs, people who are creating inspiring work in a variety of fields. I have been working as a professional photographer and as a musician for a few years, and I'm often inspired by history, science, mythology, and popular culture in the photographs that I create. In this podcast, I try to go a little bit deeper in the stories that inspire me, and I hope will inspire you too. On today's show, we journey back in time to the Baghdad of the 10th century. We'll hear ancient melodies on a beautiful instrument called the qanun and explore forgotten music, poetry, and history. My guest is Dr. George Sawa, a renowned musician and historian specializing in medieval Arabic music. George has written 4 books, published over 50 articles, and has taught undergrad and graduate courses on music of the Middle East in the University of Toronto and York University. In 2005, he received the prestigious Lifetime Achievement Award from the Egyptian Ministry of Culture for his research in Arabic music history. What I love about George is that he's at the same time a scholar and an artist. He creates beautiful music that echoes 1,000 years of history. I hope I can get to my 70s with the same enthusiasm that George has, always working on new projects, bringing music, thought, and joy everywhere he goes. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Dr. George Sawa. I am here today with Dr. George Sawa, historian, musician, and master extraordinaire of a bunch of different things. Thank you for being the first person to be interviewed in my Wanderings podcast.
All right.
So welcome, George.
You're very welcome. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah. So the first thing I wanted to do is just to give a brief introduction about your work and what you do, right? And about yourself.
What I do now is do research on medieval Arabic music, concentrated on the early Abbasid, which takes us from 750 to 950 AD. And it is the golden age not only of music, Arabic music and Persian music, but also writing on music discourse. And that includes theory and storytelling about musicians. We have not managed from this time onward to supersede that era. The Grand Book of Songs alone is in 10,000 pages. Wow. And it took the author, Al-Isfahani, 50 years to compile. And he could only do it because the court was very enlightened. They gave him money. I mean, you expect the court to give money for people to compose music like the Esterhazy in Austria, Vienna, Mozart and Haydn. But here, on top of giving lots of money to musicians, they give money for research on music. Mm-hmm. And his full-time job was to compile the Grand Book of Songs.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. And in this Book of Songs, I know we're going to talk a lot about it because it's like a part of your life's work, right? So this was written in what period exactly, more or less?
It was compiled in the 10th century, but using stories going back to early Islam.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, and then I understand that you have your PhD in music theory and ethnomusicology. How is that? Take us back into that.
Yeah, it's
area.
A combination of musicology, ethnomusicology, and Middle East studies. Mm-hmm. And that took 1 year of red tape at U of T for them to allow me to do something in 2 departments, interdisciplinary.
Right.
Oh my God, we cannot do that. Uh-huh. But we did. So I got a very good training in musicology, mm-hmm. a good training in ethnomusicology, and also a good training in sociocultural history of the era of Baghdad.
Wow.
In that time, and you get to know the sources, the bibliographical sources. It's a whole field of knowledge, and then you perfect your medieval Arabic. Mm-hmm. Medieval Arabic and modern Arabic use the same grammar, but medieval Arabic is more precise and use a lot of words that we don't use anymore. So you have to have an array of dictionaries to figure out the meaning.
Right. And that's like part of the work that you are doing now, right?
Yeah.
That you have these like comprehensive dictionaries that compare medieval way of like writing to the modern way, right? And we'll get into that when we talk about your book. But I was just thinking, like, so you were born in Alexandria, right?
Yeah.
In Egypt, and then you lived there for a while. So
23 years.
Oh wow, okay. So like those formative years, and then you came to Canada, right?
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit of like your study of music there, and then your journey to come to Canada?
It was a real accident. When I was born, I found a piano in my house. The piano has a history. My father, Dimitri, was very organized. And he said, well, I have a sister, and when that sister gets married, part of her dowry is going to be a piano. It used to be a lute, but with Western influence, you want something more technologically advanced. Not this sort of medieval lute, even though the lute is a very complicated instrument. So with Western influence, and as a social status, you would have a piano as opposed to a lute. So he bought a piano for his sister. His sister never got married. She lived with us, never got married. So I inherited the piano and started to play early Abdul Halim Hafiz songs, Ahwak with Menelaw and Sak, for example, by ear. Then my father said, oh, you're going to develop bad habits. Let's take you to a piano teacher. So he took me to an absolute nutcase, Madame Irene Drakidis, who had no other student but me. Nobody could put up with her. She was a nutcase. So I studied with her for like 12 years. An amazing musician. She played violin, she played piano, and she took courses with Alfred Cortot, very famous French piano educator. So we had Europe in Egypt without me needing to go to Europe and study these wonderful works of Brahms, Beethoven, Mozart, and Bach with that crazy old lady. She was always 49, and after 12 years, she was still 49. She never went beyond. And then I was also studying engineering, and part of engineering, you have to go to Europe and acquire some kind of practice. So I was lucky to go to Sweden, a very small city. They made electric switches and speakers for boats, all kind of stuff. So I played piano for the Swedes, and they said, okay, you play piano. Why don't you play an Egyptian instrument? You're playing Arabic music on the piano. I said, yeah, you know what? You're right. I've always loved qanun. I've never seen one in actual life. I saw it in films, but never seen it. So I resolved to go at the age of 19, learn qanun. And the way I was received in the Arabic school was unbelievable. They were so touched that somebody, middle class, most musicians in Egypt are very poor, middle class person, who plays piano in an advanced way, is going to condescend and play and learn the qanun. Quote unquote condescend, even though the qanun is very complicated instrument. So they treated me so well, and they were so kind. That's my teacher in Egypt. Oh, wow. So I took 4 years of intensive qanun playing. I wish I'd stayed longer, another 10, to study with the old masters. I also happened to have studied with the last group of the old school.
All right, yeah, which is something we're going to talk about.
Sure.
And then after that, then you came to Canada. Yeah, and then you've been here. We're actually recording this in Toronto. You've been here. I mean, you travel all over the world, like for
since
your performances.
1970, 48 years here.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So spent 2 years to do a master in musicology, ethnomusicology, 7 years to do a PhD in Middle East Studies and Music, and I finished in '83, and it's been 35 years doing work on medieval Arabic music. Non-stop.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And one of the things that, like, we're gonna get to the qanun in a bit, but I just wanted to, like, for the listeners that are like not necessarily versed in the differences between like Arabic music and Western music. So can you talk a little bit about the difference between Western music and to Arabic music?
Western music and Arabic music were the same up to the 10th century. You have a singer and you have a lute, maybe another flute and a drum. That's about it. Then the European started to add voices. Instead of one voice, you have two singers doing different things, then three singers, then a big chorale. And then they slowly went from monophonic, only one sound, one melody, into a polyphonic. Mm-hmm. And then more and more voices were added. Then they use counterpoint when you have two melodies at the same time. Then you have harmony, it's sort of one melody with chords in it, what you call chordal music. Mm-hmm. And then bigger and bigger bands and orchestras. Arabic music stayed the same, so did Turkish and Persian, and most of the non-Western world. Mm-hmm. There was sort of just one melody. And when Napoleon came, he brought the French army, and they managed to beat the Mamluk army because of their higher tech in warfare. And then we believe that because they beat us in warfare, they're better than us in everything, including music, which is not true. I mean, you have our style, and it's a very rich culture, and so is Western culture.
Right.
So there is this movement in Egypt. The only reason our music is not international, like Western music, is because we don't have harmony, counterpoint, and orchestra. So we have to move on and orchestrate our music. But what do you do with the quarter tone?
Right.
It does not fit with the manuals of harmony. And sort of utter nonsense. And I believed in that, and that's one reason I came here. And I said, well, instead of jumping from the 10th century, when Europe was exactly like us, to the 18th and 19th century, when they had all this edifice of sounds, the orchestra. Let's see the steps it took Europe to go from monophonic to polyphonic. Mm-hmm. And after 2 years of studying the movement, I said, you know what, let Arabic music be as it is. Melody and our rhythm are much varied and richer than... I mean, Western music has, very limited number of keys, time signature. 2/4-3/4-4/4, and that's about it. Arabic music and Ottoman music, we have 111 different meters. The longest being 176,
right,
which is on my first CD. But they were also, in the medieval time, emitted in 200 beats to a bar.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And our maqam, Western music now is relegated to major and minor. Arabic music at one point had 120 different modes.
Right.
That use quarter tone, ninth of a tone, 18th of a tone. And the quarter tone theory is really misleading because it's way richer than just dividing the tone into 4 divisions. It's 11 divisions.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things that I know it's hard to wrap your head around. Intuitively whenever you listen to Arabic music for the first time, or there is a certain aspect that you can't put your finger on that you don't notice, but clearly that it's different than the most of the Western music that we're used to playing or listening to. And then when you start going into that, since it's like the approach even to the scales or modes is different. It's this idea that in the Western world, they basically at certain point simplified the number of the combinations of sounds that you could make in order to make the harmonies and all those things to work, right? Whereas in this idea that you were saying about a quarter of tone, it's a quarter, but it's not really a quarter because you can, depending on which maqam, which scale, they will do, say if it's going to be E half flat, it's not going to be exactly half flat of another maqam, right? I know maybe we lost a little bit of our audience in this more geeky conversation, but the idea is that in Arabic music and in the modes in the Persian world, in the Turkish world and beyond, they're not limited to, as you said, this major and minor scales that allow the musician to have a wider range of sounds and make it more rich, right? Yeah, cool. So let's talk a little bit about your instrument, your main instrument that is the qanun. Can you tell us a little bit about the qanun and what it is? And
okay, to play it, you have to be a eternal sufferer. It has 78 strings, which is a reduction from 105 at one point. Thank God, it's only 78. But the weather is unforgiving. If it's dry, the pegs get loose. If it's too humid, the pegs get too tight. It goes out of tune quite easily. It also has 5 pieces of fish skin under the bridge that get affected by humidity or dryness very quickly, putting your whole instrument out of tune. And on the left-hand side, you have levers to give you 1/9 of a tone, quarter tone, and whatever, half tone, full tone. And your 2 hands are separated. One is here, exactly, the right hand is right in front of you. The left hand is at an angle at the bottom. Mm-hmm. Your eyes cannot see the 2 hands at the same time. So one hand has to go blind. Add to this notation. My old teacher said to me, don't use scores, learn by heart. Learn it by heart and get rid of it, because you can't look at the score and look at your hands. Mm-hmm. On top of this, if you have a conductor, you're in deep trouble. You need 4 eyes for the qanun alone. 2 for the right hand, 2 for the left hand. Mm-hmm. Another 2 eye for the score, another 2 eye for the conductor. It's a nightmare. Oh, wow. Very, very difficult. That's it. But then you learn not only pieces, but how to ornament. Mm-hmm. There is good ornament, there is bad ornament. Mm-hmm. How can you tell? Your ear and your taste. Mm-hmm. Then there is the issue of creative performance. You cannot and will not and should not play the same piece twice the same way. Mm-hmm. Every time you put an ornament in a different place, provided it is the right ornament. Mm-hmm. There's so many right ornaments.
Right.
So you're on stage, you're playing, you're not bound to a script. If I play Beethoven Sonata, I have to play Beethoven Sonata. I cannot add or remove any note. Mm-hmm. Not when I play qanun, I can add and remove notes. I can skip a section if I don't feel like doing it. Mm-hmm. Imagine playing Beethoven Sonata and skipping the second movement. You can't. So this is the beauty of Arabic music. Mm-hmm. The creative part of a performance makes the performer free, mm-hmm. not petrified and paranoid. And the audience, in Western music, they know every note of your score. In Arabic music, you have a lot of freedom, and that's so beautiful.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Like, that's one of the things that one of the many things that drew me to this specific kind of music was this idea that as the performer, you are in a way also the composer and the creator. Yes. And it's and not only that, it's like you are there. So today I'm feeling this way. This happened in my life or whatever, and then you put all that that feeling and who you are in the music itself right then, right? So in the music can it's sort of like the written score of even if it's not the written score, even if it's like a known song, it's sort of an excuse for you to show who you are and where you're going, which is why to me it's one of the main things. Sometimes you go to a show and you want to see that musician play exactly like he played in the 1970s, for example, in Western music. And whereas here you were it's part of the culture that I'm going to see this oud player or this qanun player. I want to see what he adds to the repertoire and to the through his ornamentations and everything. And one thing that I wanted to ask you about ornamentations was when you're trying to ornament, you can ornament within the and you are going to get the qanun later and do some examples of that, but so you're trying to do you have the main melody and then you're trying to embellish the melody according to the way you want to do, or you can go into, it's called the taksim, right, an improvisation, which is a different thing, right? So can you talk a little bit about
taksim? You're going to improvise. Mm-hmm. And to improvise properly, you have to spend a lot of time listening to great masters. To not copy. Never copy. Because you never learn. Listen, then you do your own style. Mm-hmm. And the more you do it, the better you get at it.
Right.
And again, Taksim is improvised. There are ways to begin, ways to do something in the middle, and ways to end. There is a set of cadences. Every maqam has a set of cadences that would not work for another maqam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So is it like something that is sort of built in or natural to that maqam, that you would do a progression in one way or another way?
That's right. It's sort of a compound of a lot of sub-phrases, motives, very short motives, and they're not set in stone. Mm-hmm. And you can expand, you can reduce, how you string them together, mm-hmm. The movement of the melody, the duration of the melody, your own taste. Mm-hmm. All these are factors mm-hmm. in your taksim.
Yeah, and then just to go back to the idea of the ornamentation. So then in the case of ornamentation would be, let's say, notes within notes, right? So if you have between the certain notes that are like the main melody, you would add certain things that would have different rhythmic patterns or different... so that's...
It's very much like when you play Bach and Scarlatti, all this ornamentation of the Baroque mm-hmm. that make music so beautiful. Mm-hmm. But at least they codify them in Western music.
Right.
We have not sat down and codified these ornaments. We can, and you can do a great service to next generation. Okay, mm-hmm. Here are 200 different ornaments. It's up to you to choose 10 of them.
Right.
Or all 200s. Mm-hmm. It's up to you. Mm-hmm. But at least you should guide the new generation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which brings us to like one of the things that we started talking about in the beginning, which is part of your like life's work that is finally getting to be like published soon, right? Which is your translation of the Book of Songs, right?
Yeah.
And so can you talk a little bit about your research into that?
I started the translation of the Book of Songs. Okay. We cannot do that at this point because it has been edited. It took the editors I think 50 years, a team of scholars to edit the first edition. Actually, no, it was the third edition, but it was a team of scholars doing it. And because they are not experts in every aspect, I mean, you have to have an expert in perfumes, mm-hmm. expert in mascara, mm-hmm. food, architecture, furnitures, and music, and poetry, and prosody. So what I did, I said, okay, I can take care of the musical aspect of the Grand Book of Songs. So I spent 10 years going through 10,000 pages of the Book of Songs and entering the meaning of technical terms pertaining to instruments, rhythm, modes, musical forms, aesthetics, music analysis. It's a huge field. And I was surrounded by 17 dictionaries trying to figure out the meanings. And I'm hoping that this would be a step for other scholars to do a glossary. I did the music, there's a glossary of terms dealing with poetry, mm-hmm. furniture, architecture, you name it. I cannot do all of it. It's not my field. Mm-hmm. But it's, once this is done, then you can do a final edition of the Grand Book of Songs. But that won't happen for another 200 years. Mm. Yeah.
Oh, so can you talk a little bit more about like all the things that are involved in this Book of Songs? Apparently, it's not just the idea of music; it's about all aspects of performance. Yes. So, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's. I mean, the compiler, he was given grant for 50 years, and he said, "Well, I cannot give you the list of songs composed and the modes, and the poet and the composer. That'll be very boring. I'm going to tell you a particular song is sung. This is the mode or modes, because more than one composer set the poem to music, and they all set them to different modes. And then I'm going to tell you the story behind the song, to whom it was composed, by whom, why, what is the context. I mean, American anthropologists and ethnomusicologists think they've discovered the context. Well, the context was so crucial in medieval Baghdad that they had to tell you a story about the song. Mm-hmm. And you have all these narrators talking about a particular song, analyzing it, etc., etc.
Oh, wow.
So this is the beauty. It's socioculture and dealing with music, the combination.
Oh, that's amazing. And then in terms of the music that is in this massive work, right? I assume it's music that has been passed down over like generations, and some of it even survive today. Do you know how they played? How does that work?
No, by the time Isfahani was compiling it, a lot of the repertoire of 100 years before had gone, finished, because it's oral. Some of the songs survived. Some survived for like 60 years, which is wonderful, by being transmitted orally. But the taste of the court changed. The rulers were no longer Arabs, they were Persian. They were not interested in medieval Arabic poetry. They didn't even know Arabic very well. So these musicians lost their jobs when there was a change of guards.
Oh,
See?
interesting.
So this is one reason. And then you have the eternal problem, is music sinful? Because some people say music is bad, like alcohol is bad.
Right.
And music softens the emotion and leads to adultery. Heaven forbids there be sex between men and women.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord, so music is bad. Etc., etc. But also, often music was performed in the context of a party. What do you do in a party? You eat and you drink alcohol. So music by itself is not bad, but
the context in which it was presented,
associated
I see.
with drinking, and that's against Islam, against God.
It was considered by some people at that time.
Till now, I mean, many
Yeah.
places will not have music.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's interesting. And then, but then there are like over time, because like I know that some like mushahat songs, like they were like the poetry survives from a certain period,
That's
but
it.
then the music was composed much later, right? So
Later and then lost, because you didn't have. They did. I mean, there are really 3 stories out of 10,000 pages that talks about music transmitted in a written manner. 3 stories about only about 2 songs, and the transcription was so precise that the person who received the written notation managed to perform it like the composer had wanted it to be performed.
oh wow,
But it is so lengthy, it takes so much time to do it. People didn't bother to use written transmission. Everything was done orally. So what's done orally gets lost, finished. So you have all the songs, we know the poetry, the instrument used, the mode, the rhythm, but not the melody.
oh
It's
interesting. So, but in a way, it's sort of like an archaeology of music, right?
Yeah.
It's like you were digging to get fragments from different aspects of the music.
Yeah,
but you can't really get to,
No, the
to the
melody's
soul,
gone.
to the melody's
Yeah.
gone. Huh.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
But you have to wait until the 13th century to get a transcription in the written form of 6 songs. Very precise. So they tell you, this syllable of the poem takes this particular fret on the lute, on that particular string, and the duration is 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 beats, and etc., etc.
Oh, interesting. And that's something that they were like in a way already doing back then. Then like they were like
That we don't know.
oh okay.
Because the three anecdotes that talks about 2 songs transmitted in a written fashion does not give you tables, but it's sort of a bit obscure how it was done. And so
But we know that they were like transmitting in a written form somehow back then.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting. Okay.
but then again, it was too time consuming that they didn't bother to do it. They only did it because the person wanting it was in a different city. So they said, okay, send it to me by post, as opposed to send me one of your students to teach it to me.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because that's one of the things that from I remember like reading like a lot of like musicians and scholars also, like everybody would actually go to like Baghdad to learn things and stuff, but then it was a much slower transmission, right, of repertoire and of traditions, right?
It's very difficult. Arabic music is very difficult.
Oh yeah.
And you have to have a very good ear. If you don't, it's going to take you longer to learn the song. But then you have not only learn it, you have to memorize it. Then you have to feel comfortable with it. You have to practice it. After you learn, it's not enough to learn it. Practice it to become, you put no effort in it.
It becomes a part of yourself in a way, right? Yeah, that's...
All this stuff is documented in the Grand Book of Songs.
That's fantastic. And that's, just to go back into your research into it, then you got aspects of this book that are more related to the music part of it, and then you are translating to both Arabic and English, like to modern Arabic and to English. And
the Arabic to Arabic was really what I did that took 10 years. That's different. This particular work is English translation of the anecdotes with footnotes, commentary, explaining. I mean, every story is preceded by a short introduction to frame it. Then you translate it, and you write you analyze the stuff and explain it. Yeah,
that's fantastic. And I assume that takes like most of your time, or I assume it's a very like time-consuming thing. But you've been building it over the years, like little by little. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to ask you about is this idea of, it's a concept that I find one of the most like lovely in Arabic music. That is the concept of tarab, right?
Oh yeah.
So if you want to talk a little bit about that, I think it's
tarab
great.
is, simply put, an acute emotion, strong emotion of joy or grief, basically. It can be induced by beautiful poetry, by beautiful speech, beautiful melody. Even meeting of the beloved makes you emotionally happy. It can be induced by a beautiful scenery. It causes tarab, it causes joy. Losing your beloved causes sadness. That also tarab. It can be joy, can be grief. It's very powerful. And they have a chapter on tarab. And that chapter, I think it's around 60 pages.
Wow.
Yeah, but the other book, Arabic to Arabic Dictionary of the Ghani, have 495 entries for tarab alone.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's
But tarab, the effect of tarab are manifold. Can cause you to cry, sob, harm your body by slapping your face, jump from your seat and fall. It can make you imagine that the earth is shaking, that the ceiling is being pierced, or the house is going to fall on your head. And some of the old black and white Egyptian movies show you people listening to tarab. They grab their fez and they throw it, and it gets caught in the light above, for example.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and it is so powerful. So powerful.
Yeah, it's interesting how it's sort of like what I find fascinating, like in certain languages, that they create words to express certain things that sometimes would take like 60 pages to explain something, but we all feel. And in this case, this transcendent feeling and really being in connection with the artist and with the emotion that you're feeling. And like now you said about the old Egyptian movies, it just I got reminded of these I don't know, like Beatles video of this fan getting going crazy on it, and
that's
something
too. That's
so it's very interesting how like in Arabic music sometimes even something that you expect that you will get that from a great performance, right? From
music is very powerful. That's why they fight it.
Right.
A regime that's very conservative will fight music because music is so powerful.
Right.
It moves the masses. It may move them against the ruler.
Right.
Or the established government or whatever.
Right. And it's something that I remember in many different cultures, from my background being Brazilian, like a lot of the organization against dictatorship in Brazil was done through music, right? You get like a couple of like simple songs that people can sing and go around singing. And it's something that I know in Poland they would get together in underground places to sing songs and fight the establishment. And I assume it's the same thing with in Egypt and other places in the Middle East. Yeah, that's fantastic. So one of the things that I wanted to do now is we've been talking about Arabic music and the Qanun, so it would be cool for us to do a little like demonstration of all these concepts that we are doing. So you take it away, whatever you want to do.
You talk about tarab. This is a small segment in the Taksim. It's not a long phrase, just a bit. It's a motif, we call it. So this anyway is it's an entry. It's a statement. It's a question. Answer. So the answer was, and then I elaborated on the answer, continued. Etc. And this is really the way I envision Taksim. It's a love poem. Always starts happy, always ends sad. So here is meeting, you just have a date and your beloved came and you're happy. You're very happy. You're having a wonderful time with her or him, whatever. So I develop what's happening. Here, sort of flirtation. Sort of come and get me. Okay, this. That's the ending of your Taksim, of a section of a Taksim. I can go like going down insert. So this is even more powerful because I descend 5 notes.
And that will depend on where you want to take the song, as you said, as if it was like a love story.
Oh yeah. And then if you play that for a dancer, her body movement always inspire you to do more and more and more, and vice versa.
I think that's a good point to briefly talk about this too. That you not only you as a musician, but like in Arabic music, there is a deep connection of the dance and the music, right?
Oh, yeah,
so it's something I think is unique to, or at least in the Arabic world, the way that they connected music and dance is bar none one of the most beautiful things ever. So can you talk a little bit about this relationship between the musician and the dancer, specifically in this context that we are talking about now? Of
you get inspired by the dancer's movement, and your playing inspires her, and she inspires you, and it builds up. And it's just it's magic. It's just magic. Yeah, I did play for a lot of dancers in Brazil. I mean, it was an amazing array of wonderful dancers. Yeah, you don't have to play for too long, and just get this feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember you mentioning once like how one of the differences between like the Taksim sections in older times compared to now, that they want to do it's a 2-3 minute thing, but the idea is for you to get into it and take your time and build, and then it's sort of like creating on the spot with
I need
person,
to do a good one. I need over and over around 15 to 20 minutes. The beginning is sort of trying to test the ground, test the audience, test the dancer, and just see how it goes. Right. It can be a disaster. It can be magic. On the DVD I did with Lulu, we had a 7-minute Taksim. She said, I like Maqam Bayati. I said, okay, Lulu, let me do that. And there was no rehearsal, no editing. One shot of 7 minutes. Magic. That it just, I love what I did. I loved the way she danced, and everything was in sync. One of the happiest moments in my life. It was just so well done.
She's one of the great dancers of Brazil, and we will make sure to track down this video that is one of your DVD series for dancers that we'll talk about later, and see if we can put it online on our show notes for the episode for people to take a look. One thing that I wanted to see, like since we have the canoe right now, is can you show, for example, one, because we were talking before, like I'm thinking more for the audience that has not been introduced yet to Arabic music and these differences between these modes, these scales, like the maqams. One thing that I think would be interesting to show was for example, one regular like major scale if you can on the canoe, and then we can do one maqam and then do a different one, maybe a bayat, Hawand, or whatever you think is best. I think it would be interesting to show the difference in sound that you can get.
Sure. This is your major scale, which you call agam. Well, you can play it as a scale. But this is just the building blocks. What do you do with it? The melodic movement. The movement of the melody, I go here. It's a dance. The music is dancing up and down. This is called intiqal in medieval Arabic, or sayr. Sayr, the moving of note from note to note. And that is the most tricky part of a taqsim. And the dancer has to be very sensitive to it, to follow it. She has to read my mind before I read my mind myself, and follow every note. And that's what Lulu did. It was Munira Magharib did also so well. And Claudia Khalida in the another video I have. Oh, Yana.
Yana too.
How can I forget?
And for the audience, we were talking about my wife, Yana Komarnitska, that is a dancer of Oriental music and belly dance. So that's what we're talking about. That's what George is mentioning.
She's also knowledgeable in music, which helps her dance so well.
Yeah, that's a shout out to Yana.
We love you, Yana.
And so that's cool. So that would be like a major scale. And then can you show an example of like another scale that is in?
I'll play the minor first. This is your major. I'm going to change some notes here and make it the minor scale that we call Nahawand.
Yes.
Now I can go here and my E is no longer flat or natural. My E is in between. So I'm finishing. There you go. I went to Rust.
Right.
Different feel, different everything. And the dancer has to translate that with her body and her movement. Standard cadences. Hashish style. This is the 1915, 1920. As if you are stoned on hashish. These are called hashish music.
Oh, that's awesome. That's funny. And that's one of the things that it would be cool for us to talk a little bit about. That something that when we were having a lunch before, we were discussing how you got these recordings of your teacher.
Great master,
and the teacher of your teacher, right?
I'll play them for you upstairs.
Yeah, and then later we can, I'll grab those and we'll add that to the show. But what I was thinking is if you can like just show us like some of the differences that would be from like an older style, like we just showed the hashish style. What would be like what the teacher of your teacher would do compared to what your teacher would do?
Yeah. For example, see, back then the taqsim was measured. You can feel a beat to it. Which is very difficult because you have to start in a certain way and you have to end on the last beat. So you have to play and listen to the drum and finish with the drum. You go like this. As opposed to unmeasured. There is no beat to it.
And that would be something that was developed more modern. Cool. Yeah, and in terms of ornamentation, because we were talking a little bit about that before, can you show like what do you mean by the kind of ornamentation? So, for example, if you can show one little piece of a melody and then show how it would be ornamented, just to compare a simple like melody with a melody with ornamentation.
Sure. This is the melody. Which is nerve-wracking. It's not easy to play it like this. You need to. No, seriously. So you go. The left hand in the qanun, the old qanun style, you fill in with the left hand. The right hand is the melody, the filler is the left hand. So I double. Left hand. Left over right. As opposed to. So I can go. I can add the left hand an octave lower. I can left hand above the right. Very beautiful. I can dampen. So many things you can do. So many things. In the space in between. So here, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Very easy to do on the qanun. It's a gruppetto in Italian music. Slow speed, fast speed. Can also go a double gruppetto. 6. Or instead of down, 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 and then the note I can go up and then down. But it makes when you do it slowly, it doesn't sound good, but fast. Beautiful cadences.
Huh? Yeah, it's beautiful.
Cadences, yeah.
And this specific canoe that you're using right now, is this your workhorse canoe? Is this the one you usually use?
Yeah, because I put new pegs completely. Mm-hmm. I use the reamer and shaver to fix the holes and the peg to have the same angle, so they don't get loose with the very tough weather in Canada.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I have also the 1910, the 1900 or before canoe that never needed anything. It always stays in tune. It has no levers. Mm-hmm. These are the levers that give me sharp, flat, half flat, whatever.
Yeah.
The other one has none of it. And every time you change maqam, you have to change tuning.
Oh, I see. So it doesn't have that technological shortcut of having this levers. We'll put on the show notes for this episode a couple of photos that I took of your canoe, so we can,
of course,
so people can see, because this is an audio podcast, so people can see, go on the website and take a look and see which. To me, talking about the aesthetics of music, one of the things that I find also fascinating about whenever you start getting into this kind of music is also the beauty of the instruments themselves and how well they're
so beautiful.
Yeah, and they're so well constructed, and they have they look the part. They sound as they look, right?
They do. They do. Great art.
Yeah. So first, George, thank you for showing us.
My pleasure.
Yeah, this is just like an introduction to people of both your music and your research and the canoe, in case people haven't seen it. So I actually urge people to go take a look at George's website and check out his music and everything.
And the photos are done by an amazing photographer.
Full disclosure, I actually did photos for George for his website, and in this podcast, my idea is to go a bit deeper with people that I love and I admire, and to show their stories and things that inspire me. And it's one thing that I notice is also a good excuse for me to ask questions that would not come normally in a regular social interaction. It's, for example, I didn't know about your psycho teacher in the piano, back in Egypt, and I didn't know actually that you started with piano and then went into the canoe. It's a very interesting switch. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, when we were demonstrating the canoe and part of that music, we were talking a lot about the interaction with dancers. And can you talk more about how historically, from a point of view, how much do we know how the dancers would interact with musicians in the courts or in street dances? Because I know how it is today, that it's spread all over the world, especially belly dance, that is a worldwide phenomena. You can go to China, you can go to everywhere, and people are embracing this art form. Can you talk a little bit from a historical point of view, what we know?
I don't think we know enough. We know the types of dance that were used. We don't know the steps, but often musicians, dancers, and prostitutes were on the same level at one point. And another point, they were very much respected. So it depends really much on the patron who is at the court.
Yeah, and we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of years of history, right? So
see, with Arabic music, including Persian and Ottoman, you're talking about 1,400 years of tradition. And we don't have enough scholars to work on the material. In Egypt, they're too busy working on Western music instead of taking care of their own music. And we don't have enough libraries to have all these sources. You have manuscripts, you have books, you have dictionaries, biographical literature, bibliographical literature. It's a huge field. And without these tools, you cannot do much research. I'm lucky to be in Toronto. We have Robert's Library that has over 10 million books. And almost everything to know about Arabic music in print is there.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay, I didn't know that.
Because you are a rich society, and maintaining libraries and buying books is very expensive.
Right. Yeah, so, and that's one of the things that your work is trying to, put a dent into this thing, that is you are getting these older manuscripts and these older writings and translating and trying to like sort it out, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I remember, one other time we talked, and it stayed in my mind. It's related to the idea of language and the ways that you were saying how the Arabic from medieval times, how it's sometimes more precise.
Yes.
And I remember you saying like that they had specific words for different kinds of teaching. Right? It was like, if I was to imitate you, it would be, imitate the teacher or the master, it would be one word. Or like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for music education alone, you have 57 words. ألقى, طرح على, أخذ من, أخذ على, all kind of very subtle terms. And part of the teaching, you're the teacher, I'm the student. They don't say Pedro is teaching George. علم. No. You say ضارب. I'm learning lute from you. ضارب is the third form of the verb ضرب. Includes two things. Striving and reciprocity. So you're striving to teach me and I'm striving to learn from you. And you're showing me something and I reciprocate. This is oral transmission.
Right.
All of this is encapsulated into third form of verb daraba, daraba.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
So rich.
And very precise when you know the terminology, very precise of what you're trying to do. Yes. And it conveys a lot about the meanings of even the philosophy of teaching that you're using, right? And that's very
for composition, I can't remember also a lot of terms for composing, forging, molding, composing, stealing, when you steal melodies. Oh yeah, lots of theft would happen. Attribution, you attribute it yourself even though it's not yours. Or you steal the melody, put it on another poem to hide your theft. All this is documented and has precise terms. Oh, wow. It's so much fun.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah. And it's the kind of problem that we see even, of course, today going on. Yeah. And then you see how it was already like, at least between like scholars of this kind of thing, that they were like thinking about these things already, right? Even if in the culture they borrow from each other, they are aware that, oh, that's what you're doing, right? Yeah, that's very interesting. Picking up on this idea that you were talking about how musicians and dancers, at certain times they had high status and other times they had lower status in society. That reminded me of your latest book that has a lot of interesting stories. And so it's called Erotica, Love and Humor in Arabia, Spicy Stories from the Book of Songs. Can you talk a little bit about this project?
Yeah, this is medieval Arabic porn. And that was the basis for the Arabian Nights 5 centuries later. But this is much worse than the Arabian Nights. The Arabian Nights you can translate because it's not as massive a collection as the Grand Book of Songs. So the beauty of the Book of Songs, of course, material about poets and musicians, analysis of poetry and music and you name it, but also a lot of material on love. Platonic love, sexual love, obsession with sex, obsession with love, heartbreaking love poetry. So you have this guy saying, I cried so much for my beloved to come, she has not come, I have no more tears in my eyes, I have to borrow an eye to cry with. Have you ever heard somebody borrowing an eye to cry with? And then he said, love at first is very easy, but then the young lover comes up with terrible pain later on, which is so true and so moving. And the beauty again about the medieval society, medieval Islam and medieval Arabia, they were not homophobic. So you have poetry praising heterosexuality and homosexuality, bisexuality. You have poems praising white, black and yellow women. So it was not racist. Okay? And a lot of poems praising women, a lot of poems where women put men down. And we have the feeling that in the modern Middle East, women have no power. Of course, it's not true. Egyptian women are very powerful, but they don't show it. But back then, for example, this poet says to a poetess, you know, I'm dying to do something with you. I mean, he wanted to make love to her. And what I will do will not hurt your back. So she answered in poetry, in the same meeting, the same rhyme, yes, sir, it will not hurt my back, but it will inflate my tummy.
Yeah, right. So
Very
it's,
clever.
So it's this combination, as the title says, right, of erotica, love, and humor that is so intertwined in the culture. Right?
Yes, very much.
Fantastic. And this material was translated from, just to get the timeline correctly, so this is from the 10th century?
Yeah. It's the same source. I mean, I did the whole dictionary, Arabic to Arabic, and as I was doing it, I found the stories. I put them in a different file.
Right.
And as I was doing the glossary, I also found other story to put in my next book, and that's musicology and socioculture issue of music and dance.
Right.
So we talk about theory, instrument, transmission, composition, performance, social status, tarab, all of these things.
And this is what you are working on right now to finish the last details for that, and it will be released
hopefully this year in Leiden in Holland by Brill. I mean, I'm just waiting. The last step now is to get, like I had my own private editor that worked on the text,
right.
But that's not enough. It has to go to the editor at Brill in Leiden to have one more reading and send me more corrections. So I need to work on that.
Right, that's fantastic, yeah, and congratulations on.
Thank you, sir.
And having this massive work being
4 years on and off.
Oh wow, that's fantastic, and it's. That would put you, it's probably you are one of the people that know most about, an authority on this text specifically.
About that era. About that era, yeah. I mean, some people sometimes say to me, write me an article for a dictionary of 2,000 words about Islamic music from the 7th to the 20th century. So I can't. I can't. It's not possible. And I can do something up to the middle of the 10th century. But that's it. That's what I know. And I spent 50 years on this. Yeah.
So we're going to show the sound of the Qanun from the 19th century or earlier, right? We'll just move to a different room to do that recording. Before we do that, if you can tell people where they can find you and your website and all that kind of information.
GeorgeDimitriSawa.com.
GeorgeDimitriSawa.com. Go check out George's music and a lot of information on his website as well as his recordings. So we're going to finish off by going and listening to some old style kind of instrument.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So now we moved to a different room in George's house where he has his collection of instruments, including tambourines and a lot of frame drums. There's the hola next to me, which is sort of like it's a specific kind of Middle Eastern drum that has a very thick sound. We heard a qanun that is a bit more modern, and now we're going to show the sound of an older style qanun. Can you talk a little bit about this relic that you have here?
This relic, I bought it in 1974. I went to a collector. He had 7 qanuns. I played all 7, and this one had the ruler with the levers were hiding the ornaments. You can see the 2 different colors?
Yes.
So I knew it was a later addition to an antique instrument. And the sound was so powerful, I decided to buy it. Brought it here, removed the levers, put a new ruler that looked like 19th century qanun rulers. This is the grooves that the strings go through before they get to the pegs. And I just brought it back to its original shape. The only thing that's left is to replace the nylon string with gut strings.
Right.
So instead of $100, I have to spend $1,000.
Oh wow!
But since I'm crazy, I'll spend $1,000. The qanun made all of gut strings.
Yeah, and then you were saying that it's very hard to track the actual origin of instruments, but you said that you saw a publication from 1904. Is that correct?
Yeah. Publication in Egypt in 1904, a sort of general introduction to music. And there's a photograph of an instrument, looks exactly like this one. The same angle here, the same angle here, and just exactly the same.
Yeah.
So this is probably late 19th century.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. We're going to show a photograph in the show notes of this specific qanun and comparison with a few others, because you really want to see the craftsmanship and the work. And you were even mentioning before we actually started recording how some of the original materials here, like the pegs, are made of ivory, right?
Yeah.
So it's
the top,
to transport.
It's made of wood, very hard wood, but the top is ornamented with a half cylinder. So they have a sphere of ivory.
Right.
And here is a beautiful ivory, and that appears on my 2 CDs.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, so it's a little detail that people can check out. And that's just one thing to mention, that the audience for this podcast, not specifically dancers, but if you're into that and into really appreciating Arabic music from a dance point of view, you can take a look at a number of DVDs and books that explain the rhythms, the maqams, which are the modes of Arabic music, and all of that information is on your website, and it will be on the show notes for this episode. So maybe we can go into this, showing a little bit of how it sounds.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Very powerful sound.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
But if I want to change maqam, I'm here, for example. I use my thumb to shorten the string. C, D, E, F flat. I play D sharp. Back to Ras.
That's fantastic.
The sound is so powerful.
One of the things that I just noticed is how since the technique will be different to get to those notes, the forms of expression that you can do when you have to do using one instrument or the other one actually informs and changes the way that you are actually
very much.
Where you were able to do, right? So I think my goal is that with this podcast we can have, like, sometimes get an idea from one area, for example, music, and then you apply to other kinds of artistic and creative endeavors, right? So one of the things to think about that I think it's like a cool takeaway from watching you play and demonstrate this specific technique that I haven't seen so close up before is that depending on the tools that you have, you'll have different kinds of artistic expression, right? And how that can be translated in different kinds of art forms, right?
Absolutely.
So that kind of limited. It's very, very interesting. Thank you for showing me that.
My pleasure.
Cool. So with that, George, thank you so much once again for being with me. Thank you so much, George.
Welcome, my pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you. So that's it for today's show. Thank you for listening to the first episode of the Wanderings podcast. You can find show notes and links at pedrobonatto.com/podcast. I put there some photos of the canoe you heard on this podcast, and I'm sure you'll find it as beautiful as I do. If you like the show, I would love if you could share it with your friends or leave a review on iTunes. You can find me on all social media at Pedro Bonatto, and you can find my photography work at pedrobonatto.com. The music for the Wanderings podcast is provided by the Blue Dot Ensemble, a music and dance group exploring traditions from all over the planet, where I am one of the founders and the lead drummer. You can find us at bluedotensemble.com. So tune in next week for another show. Until then, I urge you to keep following your curiosity, and I'm looking forward to our next Wanderings together.